Welcome to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. My name is Jamera Burley, and I'm joined with my brilliant co-host, Bria Baker. And today we are going to be talking about a topic that is impacting the reality of millions of Americans: mass incarceration.
Yeah, we're talking about cages, control, and capitalism, the three C's. Because despite declining crime rates, America is still the most incarcerated country in the world. And that's not by accident, it's by design, and only getting worse as the Trump administration doubles down on criminalization.
Absolutely. This episode will explore how the criminal legal system is built not just for punishment, but for profit, and how it continues to devastate Black, brown, and low-income communities across the United States. The U.S. is responsible for 5% of the world's population, but we account for more than 25% of its prisoners. Why is that? Are Americans more inherently violent, or are the systems that govern American more violent?
1,000,000%. And there we go with my percentages. But no, I think also on that point is that so many other jail and prison systems around the world are not for-profit systems. And so not only are they not incarcerating as many people, but the goal is actually rehabilitation, not making money for shareholders, not recidivism, because that keeps beds full and that's good for, again, shareholders, but actually making sure that when people are getting out, they are able to return to society. And that's just clearly not a priority for this country. I mean, so many people are languishing and dying behind their cells, and that serves shareholder desires. So it's really this vicious cycle that only benefits that 1% and those invested in those industries.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one thing that many people do not know is that many of these for-profit entities, whether it be detention centers or official prisons and jails, have contracts with local governments that basically says that they need to fill the state needs to fill a certain amount of beds. Otherwise, they renege on their contract. You know how dangerous that is? That now incentivizes police, cities, and states to fill beds versus actually to solve crime.
Oh, yeah. And that we see that playing out in things like stop and frisk and similar policies, where there are now quotas around, even if there is not crime, you have to hit a certain amount of numbers by the end of your shift for it to be considered success. And for me, it's like, well, isn't the goal for police to get to a place where they do not have to rest so much, because we are preventing the harm to happen? But no matter whether the crime rates are down, the quotas remain the same. They actually are going up with time. And so that's when you have moments where, okay, typical incarceration is not sexy, but immigration detention is. To bring up a pop culture example, Orange is the New Black. I mean, the show has been out for forever. So if this is a spoiler for you, that you took too long to watch it. But they kind of showed this in the last season where, the movement against mass incarceration and the Black Lives Matter movement is really pushing the closure of jails and prisons. And so you have these nonviolent offenders and women who have served the majority of their sentences who are being released from the prisons and rearrested in the parking lots. And this is really something that happens by ICE and sent to immigration detention centers, because that is the new area without oversight, the new area that you can do things on. So I'm just really glad that we're digging into this even before we bring on our guests.
Yeah. And let's be honest, the system targets those who are the most vulnerable within our societies, oftentimes who lack the least amount of agency. And I'll be very transparent. I come from a family where I have multiple family members who have been incarcerated, and none of those incarcerations of my family members or those within my community made my community more safe, because the idea that arresting people, taking them off the street automatically creates safer environments, it's actually false. The presence of police oftentimes make our communities more dangerous. And so I think we as a community, in a collaboration with our elected officials, need to have a much larger conversation of how we define public safety, and making sure that, arresting people on suspicion of violence isn't the same thing as creating a just and safe environment for everyone to be able to live and thrive, especially with these now ICE raids that can go into churches and schools and grocery stores and people's homes. That doesn't make us feel safe. If anything, it creates an increased level of tension that all of our communities now have to navigate.
Yeah. And it goes back to profit. It's all about, the expenditures are really investments for them, right? So the US spends $182 billion a year on incarceration. That's an investment by the United States. And they know that they're going to get a return on that investment. That investment goes into prison guards and barbed wire. It also goes into surveillance tech. Anywhere you go, there's a camera watching you, e-monitoring, cash bail, phone call fees, commissary markups, medical care that actually doesn't care and is ineffective, contracts that profit off of suffering. That's the reality of where we're at. And so people are putting their money into these systems knowing that it's big business. It's big business in this country.
Absolutely. People used to think we were joking when we said it's $1 billion industry. And I used to work for Amnesty International leading its mass incarceration work. And one of the things that I find very fascinating, which is why I think building the coalition around mass incarceration reform in the United States is so hard, is that in the 1950s, in the 1940s, and the 1930s, America used to build things. Fun fact, we actually used to build things, right? During the Industrial Revolution, before the Fourth Industrial Revolution, we used to build things. And so a lot of small towns around the country used to be absorbed by these big factories that provided jobs for the local community. Guess what those factories have now been replaced with? Prisons. It's hard to go into those communities and say, we need to reform mass incarceration. We need to, stop the violence, provide justice, and reform mass incarceration in this country. Yeah. But these folks, this is the only jobs that they have for 50, 60, 70 miles in their hometown. And that is, I think, goes to show you just how deliberate and the intentionality is to stop a lot of the reform that is necessary. And you have like progressive mayors, or quote unquote, progressive mayors across the country who are building these cop cities. It's like, at the very least, are you going to believe the data that arrest more police does not make our community safe? And it's becoming extremely frustrating. And I think it goes to show the rest of the world that America is not as free and just as it claims to be. Like that wool is now being pulled off the rest of the world's eyes.
Yeah, 1 million. Oh, I love that you got into that. So real, so real. And also, I think the emphasis too, because there's a Nelson Mandela quote of like, you can tell a country's values, I'm paraphrasing, you can tell a country's values by how it treats its children and its most vulnerable, including prison populations. And in America, those are one and the same. Young people are such a large part of this prison industrial complex as well. To bring up, like our past work, we are both on the boards of the Gathering for Justice, an organization founded by Harry Belafonte around juvenile justice and ending child incarceration. He was inspired to start this organization in 2005 when a 5-year-old Black girl named Jaisha Scott was arrested, handcuffed in her classroom for throwing a tantrum. What are we talking about? And so you have this civil rights icon, this movie star, this musical legend who is watching a young Black girl being arrested in her classroom and who is saying, what did the civil rights movement accomplish if this is what's happening to our young people? And so that is what scholars are calling the youth control complex, this web of system that criminalizes Black and brown youth from school to the streets. There's an incredible book called Push Out that talks about this. Which specifically happens to young Black kids who are told you're being too loud in class. That's disorderly conduct. You can be arrested. You defend yourself at school and get into a fight. That's now an assault charge. And so kids are not being treated as kids. The school to prison pipeline has really become this cradle to prison pipeline. And so from birth, young Black children, young brown children are being criminalized and shuffled through these detention centers and primed for their real role, which is to be adults in the system, which is, again, an investment. You invest in it when they're young, and now you know that you have a future prison population the moment they hit the age of being seen as adults.
Oh, the adultification of Black and brown kids are staggering. Like Tamir Rice, right? Like a little boy with a toy gun in a playground being shot within seconds of police arriving on the scene, believing that he was a grown man and he had a real gun. It just goes to show you the lack of training our police officers have,
how they're being trained. Yeah.
The fact that they don't care, right? They don't care because they know that they can cause harm to Black and brown communities, and there's going to be little to no accountability, or the city's going to write a check with our tax dollars to the victims. I also think what was really important about your statement, is this idea that we have instructed entire ecosystems, right, that filters children up to the school to prison pipeline or school to deportation. And a lot of it is based on if you ever gone into an inner city school If you ever gone into an inner city school, and I've been to inner city schools, we've been to inner city schools.
Mhm.
If you go to an inner city school and then go to a prison in the United States, they are vastly similar.
Mhm.
Bars on the wall, metal detectors at the door, telling students that need to walk in one file line, not talk until spoken to. This is the culture of how we're training and teaching kids to go into a prison. And I know it's going into prisons and it's not into the workforce, because no workforce look like that, right?
Mm.
No workplace
Mm.
looks like the way our schools are designed. And there's a really great meme that like shows the parallels between everything from the cafeteria to the classroom to the hallways, the metal detectors, how eerily similar they are to our incarcerated systems in this country. And I just want to tell y'all, it's devastating to think about raising children, raising a family in a way which will criminalize them from the moment that they breathe, actually before they breathe their first breath in this.
Yeah, because I have a little Black son, a beautiful 1-year-old baby boy, and thinking that there's someone looking at his beautiful face and smile and planning on conditioning him in those ways is really terrifying, because it is conditioning. It's making people comfortable with the surveillance, with the control, with having so little autonomy over your life, so that when you are further entrenched into these systems, it just feels natural and not abnormal. And like you said, you just described the schools that I went to growing up, especially around a holiday. Like I remember talking to my wife about the fact that around Halloween, we couldn't bring book bags to school because it would make the lines at the metal detectors longer. And then at the last weeks of school, they had to be clear book bags if you did bring a bag. Like all of these moments are to say, because when you go and visit someone in jail or prison, they'll tell you what colors you can and can't wear, how low your neckline can or cannot be, what you can or cannot bring in with you. And so it's all control, and the control is tied to the profit, because then when they control what you can bring in, then you have to use their privatized systems. You have to use their telecom giants. You have to use their food vendors. You have to get the clothing that comes from the specific companies that make prison clothing. And so it's why they say the system isn't broken. It's working exactly how it was built to be. The conditioning leads to dependency on the same corporations and companies that fit into the guidelines that work within the system of surveillance and control. And then you don't even think about the fact that, oh, wait, basically you're telling me I have to spend my money with these spaces to have any sort of freedom or connection to my people on the inside, or if you are on the inside, to my people on the outside.
Yeah. And I can tell you there's nothing normal about holding people in bondage. We all know, if you ever read The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, we know that slavery didn't end, it transformed into mass incarceration. And we're going to dive more into that with our guest, Bianca, when we come back. But just to remind you, you're watching The Other Side of Change only on the Black Star Network.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.
if we don't stand up for Medicaid now, in spite of my honorable military service, the Senate will kill my child.
I want the people that are trying to take this away from us to put yourself in our seats.
Congress people, you got free health care paid for by the people, and then you don't want the people to have the same thing you have. That is sick, and we must challenge it.
This bill will deny millions of people the health care that they need. This is policy violence.
And we won't be silent anymore.
We are back on the other side of change, only on the Black Star Network. We are joined today by someone whose work has fundamentally changed how we understand incarceration, and I know it will change how you think about this as well. Bianca Tylik is the founder of Worth Rises and the author of the newly released book, The Prison Industry. It shines a light on the billions made off the backs of incarcerated people. We are so grateful to have her. Bianca, welcome to the other side of change.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you both, Jamira and Bree.
No,
Yes.
thank you. Yeah, we were just talking before we brought you on how timely this book is. And I think as folks are every few years we talk about mass incarceration, and little chips away at progress seems to happen, but largely the system doesn't change. Can you tell us, because your book, really breaks down the industry behind incarceration and how it has been, really the encyclopedia talking about corporate greed. Can you walk us through how deep and wide this greed really is and how it infiltrates many of the communities we all live and work in?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So the prison industry is an $80 billion industry, which is a lot of what people really don't understand. People think about the prison industry and they think private prisons, right? And obviously they are very, very a big part of sort of mainstream media right now because of everything that's going on within the federal government. But private prisons are really just like the tip of the iceberg. They're only about 5 billion of that 80 billion. So the $80 billion industry is more about sort of the outsourcing and money that is funneled through incarcerated bodies and incarceration system and detention as well. And so it's everything from healthcare to food and commissary to telecom, and there's a chapter about every single one of these sort of mini sectors within the industry in the book. And then importantly, with each of these, it really does, we delve into the history of how we got to the privatization of these sectors, but also the harms that they're causing to communities. And so as you said, it's like, what is happening to communities because of these particular sectors, the privatization and the corporate greed, and at times government greed that's being sort of levied, is families and people who are incarcerated are truly suffering. Everything from the cost of a simple phone call that leads 1 in 3 families with an incarcerated loved one into debt, to companies that deny people basic and preventative and necessary at times healthcare, to sort of pad their bottom lines by cutting costs and then use bankruptcy courts to wipe their slate clean and do it all over again. You have food companies that really are serving people absolutely grotesque food, and oftentimes pop culture likes to say, well, oh, food in prison is bad notoriously, and that's funny. It's not funny, because more than people who are incarcerated get food illness more than 6 times more than people on the outside, and that has long-term health consequences.
Wow.
Not to mention that they're being fed, rodent feces and body parts and things of that sort. So it's a vast industry that is like deeply impacting people in their health and their emotional state and their financial state and beyond.
Mm-hmm. Dang. Oh my gosh. I didn't, I think these are the things that are so important to outline, because as you said, they have become almost like pop culture phenomenons. There are jokes that are made about prison food, about not dropping the soap, about all of these sorts of conditions, and we normalize them, but it's real trauma and it has real impacts on people who we want to come back out of society and be able to participate and be citizens again after being treated like worse than the thing at the bottom of the shoe. I want to get into, though, what you said at the top, which is that this is an $80 billion industry and the private prisons are only $5 billion of that. Who is profiting and getting rich off of this? Because it seems obvious that the system is invisible and mysterious by design. There's like this, it's like the Wiz where, you know, it's like the wizard is behind the curtain. And so it's unclear who exactly benefits from the food being so bad, who benefits from the conditions being so deplorable, who benefits from, who gets that $80 billion.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I think that the opaqueness of our prison industry is critical to its operation, and it's intentional for the way in which it moves. You know, you have to sort of like remember that a common citizen, whether you're a taxpayer, like even though you're a taxpayer paying for the system, you can't just walk into a prison, right? Journalists can't just walk into prisons. In many states, not even elected officials can walk into a prison. And so these places are wildly opaque, incredibly, like there is just a lack of oversight of any type. And anytime you have sort of financial interests moving into a space like that, where it is just really not seen to the public and cannot be, there's no transparency, there's no checks and balances, you should expect abuse to happen. And that's particularly true when we villainize people the way that we do who are incarcerated and their families, right? So who is it who's profiting off these systems? It is a huge matrix. There are over 4,000 corporations that are engaged in the prison industry. And in those corporations, you have everything from major publicly traded conglomerates like 3M that supply raw materials for prison labor, to mom and pop shops, to local sort of car dealerships. Like, you sort of name it, there's a vast network of these corporate interests. And then they're also like hand in hand with the government. Take telecom again. You have an industry that is $1.5 billion on its own. 90% of that is actually owned by 3 companies, all of which are owned by private equity firms. One of the largest in that field, Platinum Equity, is owned by the owner of the Detroit Pistons. So this starts to like feed into our sort of social fabric, our cultural institutions, our sports, all of that, and shape how we, view what the narratives are that are told about people who are incarcerated because of those who are in power, who are making money off of it. And so it's like, it's vast in that way. But I also have to mention that it is also, sort of a huge part of that $80 billion are the corrections officers and staff that are within those prisons and jails, right? And this has to do with people being shipped from, in many cases, urban cities for jobs in rural America where prisons were built throughout the 80s and 90s and 2000s. And now we are in a situation where even when we see the actual prison population drop and maybe a prison is under threat of close, you have those officers fighting, right, to keep those prisons open. And there's something really, really perverse about saying that we need to put people in cages in order for other people to have jobs. Like, that is not how our economy should be built.
I'm so happy you made it. So we talked about that before in the beginning at the top of the show, and this idea that many of the factories in rural communities were replaced with private prisons or even just state and city run prisons. And to your point, on a larger scale, when we think about like who is benefiting, we, the public, is benefiting. The U.S. labor prison produced an estimated $2 billion in industry output last year. That's fast food restaurants. That's the signs that you need for your cars. Like, there are so many industries that benefit off.
Actually, more than that.
So exactly, right.
$7 billion. $2 billion is just services. $9 billion is like actual products that are made in prisons and jails. And even that is a wild underestimate of what comes out.
No, but so to that point, we are almost participating in the very systems that we know are demonizing our community. So how do we, the public, become more conscious of the things that we buy and participate in, knowing where they come from, but also being okay with recognizing, should we be successful in eliminating private prisons and reducing mass incarceration, that it will hurt our pockets in a way that we have to be okay with if it means creating a more just society.
Yeah, I think that there's actually a number of different interests there. I think that we're actually being short-sighted. Mm-hmm. The version that we're told now, right, and that we know, which is, yes, we are benefiting in all these different ways. And I want to be clear, it's often not us benefiting, but sometimes the corporations, governments in different places, and yes, then the taxpayers sort of down the line. But there are also, we did actually a cost-benefit analysis of ending slavery in prisons. Mm-hmm. It's 2025. We did a cost benefit analysis on ending slavery. I just want to note that. But we did, nevertheless, working with, sort of very high profile, high level economists. And what we found was that actually ending slavery would put $18 billion minimum back into our economy on an annual basis. And so as much as we are getting a lot out of the institution of slavery and incarceration, mass incarceration, we have more to gain from ending it. We just don't talk about it in that way and in the long term because we are so short-sighted about the immediate costs that need to be then remedied. Right. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, this system is in many ways a windfall, right, for the sort of profiteers, the prison profiteers that we're talking about. But the best way for taxpayers, the everyday person, to actually save money is not through the abuse of prison labor. It is through freeing people. This system is still wildly expensive, right? Yes, we might get $11 billion of products and services out of prisons and jails, but we're spending $80 billion.
Yeah.
So, or more than that, right? And so at the end of the day, and mind you, that's only prisons and jails. If you add in courts and
detention centers and halfway houses,
$180 billion. It's $185 billion that you're talking about for the entire, sort of mechanism to function. That is a huge drain on taxpayer resources. And so we can't be short-sighted in the limitations of what we get out right now, because the main people winning are not us as taxpayers. And that's beyond, that's from a financial standpoint. That's beyond the long-term impacts, economic impacts on communities and the social impacts on the ability for different families and communities to move up the economic ladder, as well as just human decency, right? And what happens to people, as well as our safety. Our safety is not served by this system. Right. So much so that private prisons, which are in most cases the only prison-only businesses that are publicly traded, in their own annual reports that they have to file for shareholders, they actually mention a reduction in crime as a risk to their business. So if you think that this system is designed to keep you safe, you are very strongly mistaken.
That's just evil.
Yeah.
Evil.
Yeah, 1 million per. And I want to get deeper into that point of we are not being served by these industries and these corporations. And you talked about the actual just human impacts. There's so many numbers that we're throwing around that are important to understanding the business and the investments and all of that behind this. But even your point about the food illnesses and that being at a greater rate inside of these sorts of facilities. Or we were kind of leaning into earlier this idea that, when parents go into prison, the whole family suffers. Yeah. And that what are the other ways that real people and families are impacted by this privatization?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these families are impacted in a number of ways, right? So people who are incarcerated are denied wages and then charged exorbitant fees and rates for often substandard sort of services and products, right? So people on average in prison are earning about 14 cents an hour. In about 7 or 8 states, people earn nothing at all on majority of jobs. And so that's important because a lot of people, when we talk about wages in prison, think, oh, well, it's the denial of wages to the person who's incarcerated, who is supposed to, quote unquote, pay their debt to society. I always say, who are you actually stealing wages from? Many of these people who are incarcerated were the primary breadwinners for their families before they went inside. You are stealing wages from their children for who they cannot pay child support or provide other types of family support, right, from their spouses and things of that sort. People come out of prison with tens of thousands of dollars in child support despite having worked full-time jobs. You are denying victims restitution. Imagine trying to pay $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 in restitution on 9 cents an hour. In that case, who is the person actually paying their debt to for the harm? Is it society? Are we the ones owed, or is it the victim that's owed? In which case, like, why not actually give them a pathway to provide that debt or to pay that debt back to that person? Right. And then beyond that, you get not just the loss of revenue for families and victims and others, but you also get the new expense lines, right? So being in prison is not free, contrary to, again, pop culture. It's like some free ride, free healthcare, free, housing, all these things. Being in prison is incredibly expensive, especially when you have absolutely no income in many cases, or, you get a check for $20 every 2 weeks. With phone calls that can, up until recently, were as much as $25 for a simple 15-minute call, thanks to some new regulations and new legislation that has come down, but can still be 10 cents, 12 cents a minute. You can still pay more per minute for phone call than you earn per hour in prison. And so where does that burden then fall? It can't be on the person who's incarcerated, because there's truly no way for them to actually pay for that. It falls on families, right? And so now families who are already disproportionately low income, have lost a income line, are having these extra costs. It's the cost of a phone call. It's the cost of visits. It's the cost of medical copays, which, big surprise to people. Yes, people in prison actually pay medical copays. It's the cost of commissary items, which I also want to say, for Black and brown people, items in commissary for hair products and skin products and things like that are actually astronomically expensive compared to those for others and those on the outside. It is tampons for women. It is all of those things, hygiene products, food. Yeah. It is an extensive array of things that families are now on the hook for.
It's almost like a redistribution of wealth in plain sight, right? Like, you're taking money from those who are the most vulnerable in society, redistributing to institutions that are inherently set up to fail. And the idea that these systems were never designed to work in anyone's favor, but the favor of those who are investing behind the scenes in the government. And even to some extent, the government is not technically like pocketing money. They're almost wasting taxpayers' money that could be going to our schools, could be going to our neighborhoods, that would make our communities safer. Bianca, you've been in this work for a very, very long time. Very long time, right? When we first met at that secret society meeting so long ago, that fake Illuminati meeting. Oh man. You then. But you've been in this space for so long, and I am curious for you, as someone who meets with members of the community and legislators all the time, who feel like this work can feel very overwhelming. How do we start kind of taking slow bites of the elephant, that in a time in which it feels like Donald Trump is only leaning in, or the administration is only leaning into beefing up our prisons and incarceration system?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a really great point, Jamera, because we don't want to leave people with a hopelessness, right? I think there is a reality that this stuff can get really dark and really, awful. I mean, people are making money off the death penalty. Like, it can get really, really dark quickly. But there are opportunities, and there are things changing, and there are fights that are winning. And I think it is important to recognize that. For years, for example, in the prison telecom space, we have been levying legislation, regulation, pushing for all these things. And these things are coming to their head. They're actually winning in many, many cases. And you say take small bites of the apple. I think sometimes we can take major bites of the apple and expect to win too.
No, I said elephant. The apple is edible. The elephant is huge.
There you go. Yes. And so we passed, for example, the first piece of legislation in the country to make communication in a prisoner jail entirely free. And we're like, we don't want it cheaper. We don't want just make it free. It is 2025. I live in the city of New York, and in the city of New York, on every single New York City block, there is a kiosk where you can make a phone call anywhere in the country for free. If we can do that for the city of New York and 8 million people, we can do that in our prisons and jails. And so we started to levy that fight. And to date, we've been able to pass similar legislation in many cities and counties, states, and even the federal system, making it such that over 300,000 incarcerated people today have fully free access to phone calls. And of course, their families. We have generated over 2.5 billion additional call minutes and saved families over $500 million. And so we are making those massive strides, and the industry is upset. They're fighting really hard in courts and all these different things, and they haven't yet been able to score their win, so much so that one of these companies is probably weeks away from filing for bankruptcy. And so it is absolutely possible. And I think in terms of what, the average sort of person can do, there's a number of things, right? You can do everything from, if you have the time, get involved in one of your local campaigns to make communication free in prison. You can reach out to your legislator to tell them to end the exception in the 13th Amendment that still allows for slavery in our country, so long as you have been convicted of a crime. And you can do that at endtheexception.com. You can follow our work, read the book, just make sure to educate yourself and then educate others around you. You can go to data.worthrises.org, which is where we have that entire database of over 4,000 corporations that are engaged in the prison industry. And have a sort of consciousness about what businesses you engage with, whether through your day-to-day life or through your investment portfolio or through the endowment of the university that you're with, or your pension, if you're working, all of those things. So, there are many steps that I think can be taken that absolutely do make a huge difference.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
That's so good to hear you say, because I know that people, feel swamped and feel like there's so many issue areas that they care deeply about. And because these corporations feel so big, like I don't have billions of dollars to go up against them. I don't have the sort of power and influence that they have, but we do have power and influence in different ways. And it's important that we leverage it and never feel as though we are helpless in this. And we have to step up, especially for those of us who are not being swallowed by those systems, because those on the inside have even less power and influence to speak out against them. So I really appreciate that. Before we let you go, tell us what you want people to take away from the book, how people can support, where they can buy, where they might be able to find you for in-person book events, all of that.
Yes, absolutely. So obviously, please buy the book. It is available in basically every online retailer, major retailer where you might buy books, as well as many local bookstores. So make sure to patronize your local bookstores. If they don't have it, feel free to ask for it. It's a great way to get it in. And then also, if you visit us at worthrises.org/the prison industry, you can find the events calendar, book talks that we're having. We just finished some in Philly, New York, and are moving to other cities around the country. And so we hope to see you at one.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bianca.
Thank you.
We appreciate you deep. Thank you for doing this work, making it so easy for us to know and be informed and take action. And good luck on the book tour.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Take care, y'all.
So we're going to take a quick break. You are watching On the Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network.
If we don't stand up for Medicaid now, in spite of my honorable military service, the Senate will kill my child.
I want the people that are trying to take this away from us to put yourself in our seats.
Congress people, you got free health care paid for by the people. And then you don't want the people to have the same thing you have. That is sick, and we must challenge it.
This bill will deny millions of people the health care that they need. This is policy violence.
And we won't be silent anymore.
everyone. We are back on The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. So before the break, we were talking about this constitutional conflict that is happening with the Trump administration. So let's break down what exactly is unconstitutional about what we are seeing with Trump and his allies, especially as it relates to immigration.
Yeah, one of the biggest threats is the use of executive power to bypass Congress. And we talked again about this before the break. I mean, the Trump administration and Republicans at large already have so much power in all three branches of government, but Congress is one of the few places where Democrats can hold some sort of line, kind of resist some bills and force conversation around things that are being passed. And so every time that the Trump administration goes around Congress, it just further reminds us that everything happening right now, it's like fair game to this administration. We really have no oversight into when and how they're making moves. It's emboldening ICE, which already had very limited oversight. I mean, you never know where someone is going, what facility. You know, when someone is arrested, you know what jail they're being booked at, when they're being transferred, how long they could be held in a jail before they have to see a judge, before they have to have some sort of right to talk to an attorney. You have people being picked up by ICE and not being heard from for weeks, who are being, having travel and deportation orders booked for them without any loved one or an attorney being able to reach them. ICE is showing up to private residences, people's jobs, people's faith spaces, people's schools, targeting people of all ages. I mean, last month they showed up to a Chicago elementary school. And it's just really weird because it's like, I'm sorry, are you supposed to be targeting criminals? Or why are you going to schools and workplaces and places where people are just trying to do what they do, to live their life, to have safety and dignity when they walk out of the door and try and make a living for themselves? And you have people who are forced to hide, or else they are dealing with ICE in public and in private.
Yeah. And again, it's easy to say that the reason why this is wrong is because it's unconstitutional. Absolutely. But also, let's be absolutely frank. The U.S. economy could not survive without the robust contributions of the immigration community that have existed in the United States since the beginning of time. Okay, that is just a fact. But we know that they want to put many of these people in concentration camps, aka private prisons, which only is going to extort free labor out of them for the ends of time. And there's a lot of parallels, right? We've seen this too. A lot of parallels are being made to Nazi Germany, which is not surprising considering that Elon Musk had the nerve to do a Nazi salute on camera multiple times that have now been duplicated by many people. I don't know why people want that online. But then we also see that these deportations and the disappearance of community members aren't new actions that have happened here in the US. They have actually happened throughout history. But now we're seeing this in broad daylight on camera, and we still don't have any way to hold these elected officials accountable to ensure we're getting the answers, but also to ensure these individuals are getting the legal representation that is due to them under the law in the United States, that would be due to any US resident as well as any US citizen.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And I mean, we said it earlier, it's the brazenness. I mean, it's just mind blowing. And this is not new for the Trump administration. I mean, we've seen another term of Trump. We saw the cruelty, the forced family separation. We saw what he does. Yeah, exactly. But this second term is just bringing out new levels of just like, we don't feel we owe you anything. We don't owe you an explanation. We don't owe you, due process. We owe you nothing. And so it's just mind blowing to be like, oh, wow, they're not hiding any of this. They're not trying to, in the name of like, it's just completely blatant. And as you said, I mean, like the comparisons to Nazi Germany are important. And it's also important that we don't gloss over American history. This is also very reminiscent of things that we've seen before that have happened to enslaved Black people, that have happened to Black people in the South during the Jim Crow era. Like, we are seeing a resurgence, which is make America great again. Like they're trying to go back in time and bring back this racial hierarchy. And Isabel Wilkerson talked a lot about this when she talked about caste. She's like, they're going back to casteism.
And I think what people need to remember is that, it's easy to see what's happening to immigrants and think, well, that's bad, but it's not happening to me. That's their end game. It's going to eventually happen to you. They want to create a system, a caste system that is going to, put all of us in some sort of either physical or virtual, either psychological chain that will not allow us to fully exercise our rights as an American citizen. And that's why we have to see the flags when they are raised, right? Yeah. See the alarm bells when they are being raised, because if we say, well, let's not worry about them because it's not us, what happens when it is you and there's no one to defend you, right? When you have allowed the system to close itself into you to the extent in which you now have no access to recourse in order to fight back. And I think that is what is really fearful. One of the things that I am fearful for right now, because they're picking up U.S. citizens. So it's not just about immigrants, right? Even if it was just about immigrants, that too is wrong. And I think we need to see other people's struggle as a reflection of our own and realize that we're in this together, that our liberation, our freedom is tied to each other.
Exactly. And that's exactly what solidarity is about too. I mean, the Mahmoud Khalil example, we talked about it earlier, but let's get in depth. This is a master's graduate student from Columbia University, a legal resident of the US. So for everyone who's like, just do it the right way, he did. And then still was taken from his home. His 8-month pregnant wife was also almost detained, but they ended up letting her stay back if she didn't get in the way of them trying to take her husband. And so it's really alarming to see this, that he can be arrested, that there was no justification, that he could tell ICE agents, hi, I have a green card. Hi, I have all of the documentation. Let me show it to you. He had his attorney on the line. They hung up on the attorney and then later said, oh, actually what was going on was that his green card is being revoked. Number one, the story and the goalpost keeps changing and shifting. That is always something to be alarmed with. So again, right now, you might not think that you're at risk because they're targeting a very specific group and you think I'm not a part of that group. What happens when they find some sort of legal loophole to make you a part of whatever group, whether that be you're a criminal, you're an immigrant, you are whatever that justification is, they will find a loophole and say, oh, shoot, we're arresting this guy and he has all the documentation that's supposed to keep us from detaining him. And we're just going to come up with something new. The White House press secretary said from her podium that he had his green card revoked because of illegal protests. That is not a thing in this country. Okay, so now protest is illegal? Like, what is really happening here? So anyone who speaks out against this administration has the risk of their citizenship being revoked, their constitutional rights being revoked. We should all be concerned. And it's been really important to see New Yorkers rising up, a very small minority of Democratic representatives rising up, which we discussed in the other episode. But like, this is real.
It's real and it's terrifying because, again, protesting by its nature means you are going against the traditional institutions of power, right? You are protesting something that they have done or is doing. So this is happening now regarding Khalil, but imagine what's going to happen if there's another police shooting and Black people go out into the streets to protest. Imagine when women start standing up for their rights and protest potentially a national abortion ban, right? Yeah. They then can say that this protest is against the law, that these individuals should then have their citizenship be revoked. Where do you go from there?
Yeah.
What recourse do you have as an American citizen if your inability to protest against the very unlawful things that are happening to you and people that you care about, or at the very least, you're protesting for someone else to live freely, right? Khalil was not protesting on behalf of Hamas, as they like to claim. He was protesting for a free Palestine. We need to stop conflating the two. You can protest and you can cheer on and you can support a free Palestine, support an end to a genocide, or even at this point, right, for people who don't want to claim it as genocide, you can support the end of a war, right? Because people are being harmed. The vast majority of them are under the age of 1, right? We're talking about 1-year-olds who haven't made it to their first birthday, who are dying, right? Yeah. So if you can't protest that in a free and fair country, what can you protest?
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And again, it gets at this erosion of protests at all. The goal is fear, is to make people say, I know this is wrong, but I can't speak up because I have too much personally to lose. Like, I can imagine being Mahmoud Khalil and saying, I have a pregnant wife. Like I have so much to live for, and being deported away from my family and leaving my wife in this vulnerable position at a time when she can probably not even fly is like very alarming and scary. And the hope is that other people say, I can't afford to speak up because I too have a child. I too have a pregnant wife. I too have someone who's in a vulnerable position, and I can't leave them behind while speaking up for other vulnerable people. What are we talking about?
But that's why they want people to have kids, right? Because then you're easily manipulated. You're easier to control. You're less likely to leave your job or request better wages because you're just trying to hold on to what you can. Which is why, again, everything is connected. We can't look at anything in a silo. It is a way to control us and to slowly strip away our ability to fight back.
Yeah, 1,000,000%, which brings us to that. How do we fight back? We're seeing some really powerful resistance from grassroots movements who are challenging voter suppression and these deportations to state governments who are refusing to comply, who are committing to being sanctuary cities. I think it's really important that we remember that just because the Trump administration is trying to instill fear does not mean that they are pushing everyone into silence. People are speaking up, and we need the silent majority to join those folks who are speaking up, to use every platform at your disposal to show up to the protests, to participate in the boycotts, to sign the petitions, to contact your elected officials. Like, we need this mass movement, and it's happening even if you don't always see it. So we've got some videos to kind of shed some light into the ways that people are either poking fun at or legitimately like rising up against this fascist regime.
Why did your family move from South Africa?
I think my parents were looking at murder.
Do you know, like, what were they doing that... Your dad is bad. He's like, you put black people in townships for 30 years, and all of a sudden you're persona non grata anymore. Do you mind telling me, Keegan, what your parents were doing that made them flee for political asylum? Oh, by the way, if you can't see the room, Keegan's white. Can you imagine if he wasn't? You know what? Here's the thing is I'm feeling you're halfway on Keegan's side, and I just want you to know I gave Keegan the opportunity to say my parents were not involved in perpetrating the apartheid, and he went, all I can tell you is they were in danger. So, by the way, Keegan, I will give you a free heckle pass if at any point you want to clear your dad's name, but you have to say what job he did in South Africa. His silence is deafening.
I love this comedian so much. His name is Lucas. He is hilarious. And this is not a new video, actually. But what I love about it is that while doing natural crowd work, there's someone who's purporting to be, you know, on the receiving end of mistreatment, to be the one who is actually being harmed by this South African post-apartheid government. And Lucas is just like, nope. I'm not falling for that. And so especially because you have Elon Musk and Trump who are kind of banding together to defend white South Africaners, we have to be students of history, and we have to be mindful of the fact that there are going to be a lot of people who are claiming to be victims of reverse racism around the globe. The more that this movement for reclamation and restitution and equity and justice rises up, there are going to be more and more Trumps and Elon Musks and Keegans of the world who are trying to stamp that out and purport themselves to be the actual victims, and that there needs to be this movement for white men who are being unjustly targeted by this woke era. And it's like, no. Absolutely not. We're not falling for that. And I love what Lucas did there. And it is very reminiscent of what Black South Africaners are saying right now. Like, we don't actually care about your tears. We are still pursuing justice in a post-apartheid world. And if that feels unfair to you, you can leave, because this is not your home, and it can't be your home. Like, listen, I'm here for people being able to move around freely, but not if you're going to come into a place and trample over the rights of the indigenous people there, trample over the rights of people of color there. And that's exactly what was happening in this situation. I love it.
Yeah, like, no one deserves to be harmed, right? But through healing and reconciliation, people are held accountable. And that for some people might feel like harm, but really it's not. And I think what Lucas really emulated is the need for all of us to practice discernment. When we hear things, when we see things, to ask questions of those who are presenting information as though it is evident in fact. I think that's the only way we're going to get out of this situation that we're in now, is people's inability to ask better questions of themselves, of their community, and of our government, to see if they respond with factual information that can be checked. Because the reality is everyone wants to be a victim when it's most convenient to them, but no one want to face the facts, how they themselves have been contributors to the oppression of other people. And now it's coming to light, and I love it.
Yes. Fact check, fact check, fact check. Ask the questions, look for the sources. Do not just accept a story at face value. I mean, even everything that we present here, like dig into it yourself and see what that is. And another great example of folks making sure that we are informed and asking the right questions is this next video of organizers warning community members against the sort of like ICE patrols and deportations that are happening.
If they don't have a warrant, you do not need to talk to them.
You don't have to answer their questions.
You do not have to answer any questions. Let them slide the warrant under the door or put it up to the window
where you can see it clearly.
It has to be signed by a judge. They can have their own warrants that are not signed by a judge.
They're not valid.
They are not valid.
Shut up, ICE.
Good morning, community. There's presence of ICE here, so don't open your doors. They are not allowed to go in unless they have a judicial warrant signed by a judge that they have to show through your window, so don't open the door.
Shut up, ICE!
I don't care.
Stay there, okay? For your safety.
Don't open your door. Please.
The warrant needs to have all the right information. If there's a mistake, you don't have to open
Yeah,
the door.
don't open the door. Let them show you through the window. They can leave it out the door as well.
If there's any mistake on the warrant, it's invalid. If your name is wrong,
Let's not open the door. Have them leave it at the door.
the warrant needs to be signed by a judge.
It has to be signed by a judge with the right date, the right details, the right name.
They can have an ICE warrant that's not signed by a judge.
Don't accept any ICE warrants. They're not valid.
Get out of our neighborhoods.
What are you doing here? Why are you terrorizing these neighborhoods? Why are you kidnapping people here? We do not want you here. You are not welcome here.
Get out.
ICE is not welcome in our neighborhood.
Get out.
You guys are terrorists.
Get out of our neighborhood.
If they have a warrant, it must be signed by a judge. Do not open your door. If there is no judge signature on it, it is not a valid warrant. You are not required to let them in. Please make sure it's signed by a judge. They can put it through the window or they can put it under the door so you can make sure it is accurate. Do not open your door unless they have a valid warrant signed by a judge.
Community is going to be the only way we save ourselves. Is people need to speak up and speak out. Oh my God. Whoever had the blowhorn, I need to get one now.
Right. No, I was literally thinking that. I was like, I need one just so that if ICE pulls up, I'm on it and I'm ready, because it's so real. They feed off of fear. They feed off of the hope that you're going to be singled out, isolated, and just unsure and not wanting to put your neighbors at risk. And so you're going to open the door to get them gone. But once you've opened the door, you've literally opened the floodgates for them to say, we were invited in and now we can take you. And I just love to see community. Number one, the repetition. It has to be signed by a judge. All of the details have to be correct. You do not need to open your door. Tell them to put it up against the window, slide it under the door so you can examine it without them having access to your home. Like, yes. But I already know your favorite part of the video.
Shut up, ICE.
That was so funny. I love it too, because it's also just like, at some point we have to remember, similar to Nazi Germany, people will say, I'm just doing my job. Well, get out of our community doing this whack job, because we don't want
you don't have to do your job. You don't have to do your job. There's I forgot who wrote the quote, like whether or not you became a Nazi in the administration working as a soldier, right? Whether or not you became that through your own volunteering, or whether you became that through appointment or through some form of nationalist ideology for what was happening with your country, you still were a Nazi, right? And that goes the same for anyone who chooses to become an officer of ICE. You don't have to do that job. You don't.
Yep.
You have to do that job. You don't have to support the regime that is locking up family members and separating children at the border and pitting kids in cages. Like, that is what you want your legacy to be, because none of that makes us safe. If anything, it perpetuates a very violent, a very fear-mongering and violent community that we all have to exist within, because now we don't know if our neighbors are going to have our back. But I think this video shows us that, people in the communities are standing up and speaking out because they recognize that America is only as great as those we allow to come into our country, make it a part, make it home, and also help to shift us to make us more diverse, more inclusive, and more welcoming to the rest of the world. A true melting pot. I think some of Trump's actions, as he continues to pick out things from the melting pot, right, and throw it away, whether it's gay, lesbian, birthing women, biological birthing women, or trans, out of the melting pot, that doesn't make us whole as a country. If anything, it makes us less than who we truly have the potential to be.
1,000,000%. And we keep us safe, community. We keep us safe. So I just love to see community members speaking out in that way.
Shut up, ICE.
Right. Shut up, ICE. Get out of this community. We don't want to hear from you. Like, I love it so much. And then our last video, another example of communities showing up. There are massive protests happening all over this country. Do not be fooled into thinking that everybody's being silent right now. So if you're someone who's saying, I'm just doing my job, or there's nothing else that I thought I could do, or I'm just focused on me and my family, there is so much that you can do. Again, find your nearest protest, boycott, contact your elected representatives, and find protests like this one.
Casey, thank you. Breaking right now, a crowd gathering this morning in downtown LA. You're taking a live look at a protest over the recent surge in ICE raids and deportations. Last Monday,
So you can see a lot of protesters in downtown LA. They've got Mexican flags. They're in solidarity. Many of these folks are themselves Chicano or Mexican American and are fighting for their siblings, their loved ones. This is what solidarity looks like. And it's so important that we not allow it to be the people who are directly impacted to be the only ones showing up. But we all have to be speaking up, whether a non-Black person going to Black Lives Matter protests, a non-immigrant showing up for immigrant rights, a straight person showing up for LGBTQ rights. We all have to be speaking up in this moment.
Absolutely. And this is a prime example of when your privilege can be weaponized for good. And I don't normally say that, but this is a moment when your privilege can be weaponized for good. If you are not a directly impacted person being impacted by a particular issue, you have the ability to put your body, your platform on the line in order to represent the interests of those communities, because you are less likely to be to face any sort of like serious repercussions. And so it's inspiring to see that. And I know that mainstream media is not showing these protests intentionally, right, to discourage all of us from feeling like we do have allies, we do have people speaking up, because they know that true change comes when people start to organize, when people start to speak out, when people start to hold traditional institutions of power accountable. And now should be no different. And I think the more we share clips like this and information like this reminds us all that we have a say, that we have a right to push back and ask for more and to demand more of our government. And we shouldn't be fearful that we shouldn't be fearful that we are not going to have the people in our communities and our surrounding neighborhoods stand up with us, because we're constantly seeing examples of that's just not being true.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. So we're going to be right back. We're going to take a quick break. You're watching The Other Side of Change only on the Black Star Network.
We
begin tonight with the people who are really running the country right now. Now, Trump is often wrong and misleading about a lot of things, but especially about history. Donald Trump falling in line with President Elon Musk.
In the wake of the unsettling news that MSNBC has canceled Joy Ann Reid's primetime show, The Readout, Roland Martin and the Black Star Network would like to extend an invitation to all of the fans of Joy Ann Reid's MSNBC show to join us every night to watch Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming on the Black Star Network for news, discussion of the issues that matter to you, and the latest updates on the twice impeached, criminally convicted felon-in-chief Donald Trump and his unprecedented assault on democracy, as well as co-president Elon Musk's takeover of the federal government. The Black Star Network stands with Joy Ann Reid and all folks who understand the power of Black voices in media. We must come together and never forget that information is power. Be sure to watch Roland Martin Unfiltered weeknights, 6 p.m. Eastern at youtube.com/Roland S. Martin or download the Black Star Network app.
We are back on the other side of change, only on the Black Star Network, and this conversation is by far not over. It is the beginning of so many other conversations that need to happen, especially as we look at the constitutional crisis that is happening with immigration here in the U.S.
1,000,000%. And if you want to dive deeper, because we all need to be diving deeper, please check out these books, The Undocumented Americans by Carla Cornejo Villavicencio, The Oath and the Office by Corey Brettschneider. And there's a new memoir coming out by Cristina Jimenez called Dreaming of Home, How We Turn Fear into Pride, Power, and Real Change. And then, of course, follow groups like the ACLU and Brennan Center for Justice, UndocuBlack, and anyone you know working locally, statewide, or nationwide on immigration.
And a reminder that an organized population is a dangerous population. And more importantly, stay engaged, know your rights, organize, and hold your representatives accountable. Until next time, keep pushing for a just future. And this is The Other Side of Change.